Hi everyone, I'm Lisa and welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio. My card today is for wine lovers. Well, you don't have to be a wine lover, but it includes the half-full stamp set from the holiday catalog. I'm going to give you some tips about using the tag on this card as well as creating that really pretty loop embellishment, which is great for masculine cards as well. Remember, if you're here from YouTube, you can find all the cutting dimensions, pictures, and supplies for today's project over on my blog. That direct link is right down in the description bar below, making it easy for you to find. I also offer online classes, which you can find over on my blog as well. And all the supplies are available in my online store, and I offer exclusive rewards. If you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and you're interested in a complimentary copy of either the annual or the holiday catalog, I would be happy to send them to you. Just leave me a comment below. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's project. Here's a good look at this wine card. Isn't this adorable? And I can't wait to show you some tips about the tag and, of course, the ribbon and threads here at the top. I'm going to start with a piece of crumb cake cardstock. You're going to find all the cutting dimensions for today's project over on my blog. If you're here from YouTube, if you click on the description of the video below, it'll take you right to my blog post. This bone folder is going to give me that nice crisp crease on my card. I'm actually going to be doing some embossing on the base of my card today. I'm using the Pine Wood Planks embossing folder from Stampin' Up! I've got my Big Shot platform here, and I'm not going to need a clear mat on the bottom like I typically would. And it's because of the depth of this folder. The dynamic name in the title of this folder means that it gives a really deep, nice impression into your paper. Now, Stampin' Up! Recommends that you mist the front and back of your paper before you pass it through to get the deepest impression possible. But since I'm going to be doing some sponging afterwards, I've opted not to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and lay my card inside here, making sure my crease is right up against the edge, laying it on top of the platform, and a clear acrylic mat will go over the top, and then I'll just crank this through. You want to make sure that your folder always clears your Big Shot, otherwise you're going to chew off some of the ends of your embossing folder. All right, so now here we go. We've got the base of our card. My next step is going to involve bringing out the tone of that wood a little bit. So I'm going to use the crumb cake ink pad, which is the same color as my paper, and I'm using a wedge of a stamping sponge. They come in a circle and I just cut them into wedges. I like to hold it by the wedge to try to keep my fingers as clean as possible. I'm inking it up on the ink pad, but I'm also stamping off. I want to make sure that it's not too dark to begin with, so I can control the coverage. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to swirl this over those embossed areas. I'm being careful not to press too hard so that the color doesn't go down into the recessed areas. And I'll just repeat this over the whole front of the card. Okay, now that that's finished, I'm going to set that aside, and we're going to use that same ink pad now in a long strip of crumb cake cardstock, and I've pulled out the wine bottle image from the stamp set, half full. If you've watched any of my quick tip videos, you will have seen a tip regarding this tag, which we are going to use today. I want to rotate my bottles up and down across the paper, so I found it easier for me to stamp this way. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ink my bottle in my crumb cake ink, and then starting at the bottom, now, if you like the Stamp-A-Majig, you can go ahead and use that for perfect alignment. I am not a big fan of that, I'll be honest with you. Call me a lazy stamper, but I like to do it the old-fashioned way. And I happen to have purchased this stamp set in wood, just for a little variation. I love wood, I really do. Over the years, I've gotten away from it with all the clear stamps, but I have really enjoyed the feeling of wood. So I'm going to do this all the way across my card. This piece is now going to get layered on a piece of fresh fig cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add adhesive to my card. That's going to get adhered here with a small border at the top and the bottom. This piece then is going to get mounted to my card, and I opted just to use adhesive. You certainly could use dimensionals if you're a fan of those. And I want to make sure that my edges are going to stay down because I've got several layers of paper here, so I'm being a little bit more generous with that. And then this is going to get laid here right across the top portion of my card. All right, let's work on the tag. This is a piece of the Wood Texture Designer Series paper. I'm loving this paper. Double-sided, comes in an array of wood tones and grains. You're going to really enjoy using that. But I've decided to stamp on this using the basic black ink. I wanted to make sure that my ink was permanent because I'm going to do some coloring. I've cut this 2 inches wide, and that's because it's going to fit through the punch. So I'm going to ink up my tag on my basic black ink. I always like to check and make sure I've got the center covered, and I do. Firm, even pressure to trace out my design. The basic black ink takes a little bit longer to dry because of the pigmentation. So while it's doing that, I want to talk to you about the burlap ribbon. You're going to see on my original card that I have a real whimsical loop here. And what I did is I pulled out a few strands from the ribbon to make this work. So I pulled out 2. So I'm going to pull out right from the center. You can pull out just a strand to use it. So 1 and 2. I'll set those aside, and now I'm ready to do a little bit of coloring. I'm going to use the blender pen for this, and I'm going to use my old olive ink to color in those leaves. Of course, you can use a marker. I'm going to squeeze the pad upside down, which is going to place residual ink inside the lid. The blender pen has a chemical in the barrel that moistens the tips. It doesn't matter which end that you use. The pigmentation will stain the tip with usage, but it doesn't affect it. I always make sure that it runs clear before I start. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of color here. Now remember that color from inside of here is very concentrated. So I like to pick it up, and I like to water it down a little bit to the side so that I can control the coverage. And then I'm going to come right inside my leaves, and I'm stroking like a paintbrush instead of coloring like a crayon. You want to preserve the tip of your blender pen so that you can get inside these nice little small areas. Okay, so that's just adding a little bit of color. Now I want to switch over to the grapes, and to clean this off, you're going to hold it horizontally on your scratch paper, and you're going to turn and you're going to roll like I'm doing here until it runs clear. Once it runs clear, you're good to go. We're going to switch now over to the fresh fig, and we're going to do the same thing, squeezing that and opening it up. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that color as well, and again, it's equally as strong, if not stronger. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to color in my grapes in a small circular motion. If some are darker and lighter than others, that's perfectly fine. It just adds a little bit of credence to some highlighting. So I'm just adding a little color to those. And I'm not worried about getting them completely filled in. Light or white areas in your watercoloring really are quite complementary. So I'm just encourage you to leave those as they are. So we're just going to add just a little bit of color in there. All right, so that looks good. Before I put it away, I'm going to scroll it and make sure that it's clean. On my other sample for you today, you'll see how I colored these in a little bit darker so that you'll have an opportunity to decide which one you like for yourself. Now we're going to punch this out. The easiest way is to turn the punch upside down so that when you slide the paper in, you can see where you're going. Even though this is a 2-inch margin, which is exactly what the track is here, you're going to see what happens is that, see how I'm a little bit off? Well, there's really not much you can do about that because it's hard to get it perfectly on there. So here is my tip for you. I took my scissors, I cut away a little bit of excess from the sides, leaving, of course, a border. This allowed me to manipulate the image when I put it back in, a little bit right and a little bit left. So I'm looking to line it up so I don't see the image at all. You see how it's almost like non-existent? That means I am lined up. So there we go. So now I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to trim off the other side. And do you notice I don't cut directly on the stamp line? I always like to leave a little cardstock around it. We're going to finish off our card now. So I brought the tag in. I've got those burlap strands we picked up, and I have that ribbon. I'm going to take my raw ends and line those up just to make it easier for me to get it through that hole. I'm going to come from the front to the back, bring those through, and I'm going to make a single tie to hold them in place. Okay, now you're going to act as if you're making a bow. I'm going to make a loop, and with my raw end, I'm going to come around just as if I was making a bow. But instead of stopping, look what I'm doing. I'm pulling these raw ends all the way through. and then I'm pulling on the bottom strands that are going to tighten up that loop. Okay? That's going to give you a really nice loose knot. I love these for masculine cards as well because they don't look as feminine as a bow does. Now, it's often difficult to kind of train burlap ribbon, so we're just going to try by just twisting it over here to the side. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to give that a little bit of a haircut, pull off that extra. Now we're going to mount this to the card using dimensionals. Got a couple of these. I'm going to put them in the four corners. I like to make sure that they're well and balanced for mailing. And I'll take off that paper backing. If you're having difficulty getting that packing off, press your fingernail in the center and that'll help lift the outside edges of the paper. And then I position this right here near the top of my card. Here's the card we created today and the card I created before you joined me. Remember to head over to my blog. You can purchase all the supplies you've seen here today right there on my blog, as well as check out my online classes tab and my rewards tab. I offer exclusive benefits for your online orders. Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.